Hello and welcome to this episode of Futures, the podcast series brought to you by CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Hey Sam, how you doing?
I'm good, Emma. First of all, tell me, how are you and where are you?
Well, I'm in very frosty Nottingham today. Nice to be home for the back end of the week. It's been a busy week. We had our Sustainable Procurement Summit in London this week, which was great. Launching the new Pioneers list. But yes, when it snows in London, you know that it's bad news, really. So we've had a real cold snap here. But yeah, where are you and what have you been up to?
That's great, actually. I was going to ask you about the highlights from the summit, but I guess the Pioneers is probably one thing that I guess inadvertently came out of that. So that's good to hear. I did see the Procurement Pioneers had been launched. Great initiative, some fantastic names on there, and looking forward to that gathering some legs as well. For me, I'm here in Dubai, 31 degrees, a little bit higher than where you are. But what have I been up to? I think the most recent and memorable thing was we held the Middle East and North Africa graduation last week. So lots of students here being acknowledged for having received their MSIPs, becoming fully qualified, and we hosted it on the historic QE2. So that was a great experience for everyone who attended, including those who managed to have a tour of the old ship when they came on board.
I saw the highlights video. It looked very flash, very nice. I loved the red carpet. Yes, it's very chilly here. I've got builders in as well, so my kitchen is currently an average of 12 degrees. It's very nice. So I'm very jealous of your 30 plus degrees.
Good timing.
Yeah, we'll tell you more about the procurement pioneers throughout the year and perhaps have some of them as guests on our pods as well. So that will be good. So it's just a list of great people doing great things in the sustainability area. So yeah, lots of more to come for that this year. So talking of great people doing great things, shall we invite our guest in? We're delighted to welcome today's guest, Sebastien Bals, who is Chief Procurement Officer at Merck Group. Welcome, Sebastien. Delighted to have you today.
Hi, Emma. Hi, Sam. How are you guys doing? Glad to be here.
Great to have you. Thank you.
Hi, Sebastien. Fantastic to have you on the pod.
Yeah, it's really great. I've known you for a good few years now, Sebastien. We first met through when we first had our procurement power list and you were on there. So I've followed your career with great interest. So I know a little bit about you, but shall we... do you want to just spend a bit of time letting everybody else know a little bit about you? How did you get into procurement? And briefly share how you got to where you are today.
You know, I think I had quite an exciting career that I wasn't expecting when I was in college back then, I would say. So, you know, I'm originally a marketing major. I did not know or did not really have a clue about what procurement was actually about. And I started my career at Thomas Cook, the travel company, and I was applying for a trainee program there to actually become a product manager. But I guess that took a turn that I wasn't expecting when halfway through the trainee program, they actually approached me and said, well, you know, we have currently an opening in procurement. And actually, having observed you over the past couple of months, we believe that would be a great place to start. And, you know, that was a bit my start of how I call my career at that time, a bit opportunistic and high-paced in that sense that, you know, I did quite a lot early on in my career. I mean, after spending time at Thomas Cook, I moved to InBev, the beer brewer, and basically that was a great opportunity for me to continue my personal development, professional development. You know, the environment at InBev again was high-paced. I had the opportunity to work in procurement, M&A, controlling. And after InBev, I basically even went into creating a startup with a couple of friends, actually two of them, two startups. But then, you know, I think I came to a point in my life where my life substantially changed. I became a father of two lovely children. And I think that I started to look at life a bit different, and I became probably more intentional about how my career would look like. And so, you know, I took a couple of decisions, and one which was very intentional, I would say, was that I wanted to continue my career in procurement. It's a profession that I've gotten to love, and you know, as I've mentioned before, I've worked in other parts of organizations, but procurement is a bit my Hotel California, where I think my interest and my passion lies. And so that basically started a second phase in my career where I went into different industries, but also expanded my leadership expertise. So I joined UCB, the biopharmaceutical company headquartered in Belgium, where I joined in procurement, then grew through the ranks to become the CPO. And then more recently, about a little over a year ago, I actually made my move into Merck, a leading science and technology company headquartered out of Darmstadt in Germany, where again, expanding the industry expertise, but also again expanding the complexity of the role.
I love that procurement is your Hotel California. I keep a little log of nice little quotes that I like in the back of my notebook, and that one's gone in there.
Yeah, so I mean, as many know, the song Hotel California you can check out, but you can never leave. I think everybody I spoke to in procurement, they always go to that position whereby, procurement will always have a special place in our hearts. And even if you go somewhere else into a different, I mean, whether it's in you expand into the business or you do something completely different, it's always going to be there.
Personally, I love that quote. I think it's brilliant. And I guess from me, Sebastian, you've had quite an unconventional route in certain extents, and in some extents, a quite familiar route into procurement, a route that's familiar with many people, i.e., you almost fell into it. But you've gone on to work for some large organizations, and now you're with the Merck Group, another large organization. So I'll be interested to know, now that you're in this CPO role with the Merck Group, just give us some insights into what the structure of your procurement function is there, and how does that structure serve the business?
Yeah, maybe I need to just take a step back for a second and talk a bit about Merck as such, because I think it's important to basically also explain a bit how we are organized. The company has three distinct business sectors, and I really call it sectors and not units because we operate truly in three different industries. So one being the electronics industry, whereby, of course, we are supporting for example, chip makers or display makers with products that go into that. So, I mean, for many of you that have screens at home or that are using devices, it's very likely that there's a product of Merck that was used to develop that. The same way on the life sciences industry, whereby we are basically a supplier to pharmaceutical companies to support them in the research and the development and the manufacturing of their drugs. And then the last part, it's the last sector that we operate in is it's a pure healthcare industry. So whereby we're really trying to improve lives of patients. And I mean, this is in the area of, for example, fertility, oncology, and the likes. And so, three distinct business sectors, but which really revolve around our joint vision, which is to elevate, to spark discovery and elevate humanity. And I think this is really what we also have in from a procurement point of view, because ultimately, given the fact that these sectors operate in totally different environments, we need to have a close proximity towards our stakeholders in order to bring the right solutions to them. Because as you can imagine, the challenges and the needs of somebody in the healthcare industry are totally different than the challenges and the needs of our teams in electronics. And so what we have done is we've created a structure in procurement whereby on one hand we have that strong business partnering tie, have that proximity to our stakeholders, but at the same time we also recognize that given the size of the organization, we're almost 70,000 or 65,000 people strong, generate revenues of more than 20 billion. There's also an opportunity to leverage our scale more transversely. So we also have, next to a more business-centered approach, we also have a more transversal approach where some of the categories that we cover them across Merck as a company. Now, that all is only possible if you also have a strong central organization that is really centered around enablement of the procurement organization, driving excellence, developing new value offerings that go beyond sourcing or spend management, such as, for example, the topics that we need around risk and resilience, about supplier relationship management, sustainability, but also digitization, of course.
On that technology, if we're talking about procurement maximizing their value, technology is often viewed as the core enabler for this. And I know you're a strong advocate of digitalization of procurement. Can you first talk to why any particular areas of procurement and supply where you think that technology really plays a role in overcoming some challenges?
Yeah, I think procurement for many years has tried to evolve to become more strategic. If you go back a couple of decades, people in procurement were often looked at as call it the box kickers and the label lickers, and they didn't really have the level of strategic influence that we have today. So I think that this is something that we've seen for many years already. And 15, 20 years ago, or let's say 10 to 20 years ago, one of the ways that we did that in procurement was really to go through a phase of business process outsourcing. So, really trying to outsource more transactional activities in your organization so that you can upskill and refocus your internal teams to deliver more strategic impact. And for sure, this has made us more impactful and more effective. But at the same time as well, the expectations that people started to have from procurement started to change. If we look at, for example, sustainability and the role that procurement is expected to play into advancing us on that sustainability journey, I think that has required of procurement to think differently in how to basically cover for this additional capacity with the existing resources. Next to that, I believe that the world around us has been changing. The user expectations that we have seen is so different now that we find ourselves a bit in what I call a 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9 conundrum, whereby, from 9 to 5, when people are coming into the office, they still often live in a very analog world, whereas from 5 to 9, when they are at home, I mean, they order things on their phone, it's delivered the next day. And digital has played a big role in setting this. And so I think for us in procurement as well, digital will be the enabler to, on one hand, become more efficient and more effective. It will also enable us to create capacity to expand our value offering whilst continuing to deliver on our core. And like I said, I think it's going to be instrumental to also support with the skill transition that we are facing for our procurement superheroes.
I like that term, procurement superheroes. You must have a fantastic team. So hopefully they're listening to this and they get that pat on the back. In terms of digitalization, I think you mentioned that what digitalization or technology is doing is making procurement more efficient. And obviously, I'll tend to agree with that. What examples of digital infrastructure or digital tools do you guys use to improve efficiency?
I think it's important to note that the approach we take is not to implement digital solutions or technology for the sake of implementing technology. We really try to do it in a very intentional way. So I really encourage my team to think and to start with a problem definition about something that we want to improve or evolve. And one of the examples I can share around that is a project we're currently doing on process orchestration. So what you need to know is that, again, Merck is a very complex system landscape. I mean, Merck has grown through acquisitions. It has grown throughout the years and in different sectors with, again, different needs, which then translated into different systems. And also from a procurement point of view, I think we've been approaching or we've been using more of a best of breed type of approach when it comes down to the digital solutions. Now, again, if you create such a complexity, how are you going to simplify it for your end users? And one of the things that we realized was that all these different tools, all these different solutions that we had was creating issues in terms of an underutilization of the buying channels that we had implemented. There was, for example, a low catalog usage. There was a large amount of free text POs because people just gave up trying to find their way through the maze. And then on our side, it then resulted into a heavy manual process. And so what we are now doing with process orchestration is actually we try to simplify this interface towards our users, both within procurement as well as from a business point of view, whilst still managing this complexity on the background and whilst enabling us to continue to follow this best of breed solutions. Now, again, we're still on that journey, so it's a bit early to really see where it's going to take us. But I think the experiences we've been having so far and we've been seeing so far have truly been promising. So I think that this is a nice example of how we're trying to be a bit on the leading edge in terms of not thinking about what we can do to optimize what we have, but actually take it really jumpstart it and take it even further.
Talking about leading edge, I guess everyone's talking about AI. Are you using it in your function? Is there a hesitancy? And I think also there's kind of a nervousness as well around individuals on, what does AI mean for me and my job? Some people are embracing it, some people are quite fearful of it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, short answer, yes, we're using it. I think within Merck, IT or our IT department has been a strong driver in terms of really pushing us towards the usage and the application of Gen AI, supported by our board as well. We were one of the early adopters of having a custom instance of ChatGPT running internally on our data. And this was basically also since then has been further developed to encourage people to familiarize themselves with Gen AI in pretty much a no-code way. I mean, even myself, I had the opportunity to play with it. There's a very simple functionality in our instance to create your own agent or your own bot to basically interact with. And for example, when I just joined Merck, I've uploaded all the policies rather than reading all my procurement policies. I've uploaded all my procurement policies and I started interacting with them in a very generative or a very conversational way. So I started asking questions about, what do we do in this case, or what is the process to follow if I want to do this. And so that was one. Then, I mean, we're currently doing a transformation project, and one of the tests that I did with it is we actually went. I've uploaded all my white papers and all my presentations that I've done on that specific project, and then basically instead of creating a traditional Q&A, I could just ask the questions to the bot, and he would give me or she would give me based on the data that I fed it. Now, these are some small examples. We're also using it a bit more at scale within procurement, both AI as well as Gen AI. So, for example, we have a Gen AI bot or agent that is supporting our stakeholders in category selection into the process of procurement to basically already guide them into the right direction. Again, whilst we are waiting for the full implementation of process orchestration, this was an intermediate and a quick step to really address one of the pain points that we had. Another example is in marketing and sales. We have a supplier recommender, and there basically we have fed that tool with all previous exercises or tenders or RFPs that we have done, and the outcome. And basically it helps our teams to basically quickly draw insights and knowledge from previous interactions that we had with suppliers. We're using it for creation of RFP documents or analyzing contracts. And we're also using it, for example, to improve the data quality that we have within our procurement data lake by having AI go through all the data and identify potential quality issues so that it can trigger action on our side. So I think we're doing quite a lot of initiatives already with Gen AI, but I would definitely agree with your point, Emma, on the adoption topic. There is a general resistance, I would say, given the impact that it's going to have on our personal lives and the uncertainty around it. But if you just look at how embedded it's getting, I mean, I have a 15-year-old son, and if you see how he's embedding Gen AI already in his day-to-day activities, I can only imagine on the speed at which this will also make an entrance, or not an entrance because it's already there, but the speed at which is becoming more relevant into procurement and into organizations.
I think that's really inspirational. And thanks for giving some real practical applications there of Gen AI, because I think what you did mention earlier on was that you don't employ technology for technology's sake. So it's good to see, you providing some really good practical uses of technology, especially Gen AI, because you're right, some people implement these systems for the sake of it without adapting it to their own business practices. So it's good to see you're getting some results. And I think another very interesting comment you made was about the 9 to 5 and 5 to 9, because I think, yes, we do adopt technology more readily in our personal lives than we seem to do for the business environment, whereas the impacts are or should be pretty much the same. But I think I'll kind of segue a little bit and turn onto the subject of sustainability, which is what I was going to talk about. But what you could probably do is articulate as to whether you think this adoption of technology that you have within Merck is useful to your sustainability aims. Is there a correlation there? And what are you doing as far as sustainability is concerned?
Yeah, so I mean, sustainability is very important for us as an organization. If we want to advance procurement, digitization will play an important role. And again, if we want to create a better tomorrow, that combination between digitization and sustainability is going to be crucial. I think two key areas where we're focusing, or which are very important, and I would like to highlight here from a sustainability point of view is on one hand, of course, supply chain transparency. On the other hand, also our ambition to reduce scope 3 emissions. And in both of these examples, there's a clear enablement that is happening from technology. If you take, for example, supply chain transparency, I mean, you want to understand in your supply chain, not only at a tier 1 level, but hopefully also at a tier N level, understanding things around human rights, child labor, and the likes. We have been subject to the German Supply Chain Act already for a couple of years now, so we might have gotten a head start on that. But if you also think about upcoming legislation around deforestation, I mean, we need digital tools to basically start mapping the operations of our suppliers, but also trying to extract data that is publicly available and trying to understand what potential risks are coming around the corner. And so I think that is a clear link where you see it. But also, if you think about our fight against climate change, we have a strong presence of digital tools. One that we use is an internal one. It's called AIM Zero, where we really apply or use that tool to calculate our supplier emissions that we have. But at the same time, we're also using digital platforms like Seagreen to capture, for example, product carbon footprints. But it doesn't stop with just capturing data. It's also using digital tools to, for example, provide training to our suppliers on certain types of decarbonization matters, like the Together for Sustainability training platform that we use, or also encourage or try to evolve their usage of renewable energy, for which we again have another tool in place called Energize. So I think in all these elements, I think you can clearly see that one could not be achieved without the other. And given our strong commitment that we have as an organization, as a procurement department, to making a difference now and for centuries or for generations to come, I think that digital is going to be key on that journey.
Sebastian, it's time for our ever popular I'm Not Buying It segment. So I'm going to give you a light grilling on something. So you talked about using digital tools to help with data and achieve greater visibility over supply chain. Is there such a thing as perfect data? Or can the quest for good data actually be a blocker in pushing forward with some action? Are we in danger of having data overload and no insight to actually do anything with it? How do you practically achieve getting good data and not letting it get in the way of progress?
I mean, data is the answer to unlocking the full value of procurement, in my opinion. There's no way about it. And for sure, there's this danger of having too much data or being too much focused on the collection of data and not being able to drive the impact from it. I fully buy that. But at the same time, if you think about the progress that we need to make, for example, if we want to leverage or fully use generative AI solutions, for example, we require data. So from that point of view, I think we need to continue. I think also data is going to be key. Or if you think about Gen AI for a second, Gen AI is going to enable us to democratize knowledge. But in order to democratize that knowledge, because you will actually be able to be in a position to stream it, we need to translate that knowledge in data. And so that knowledge no longer becomes the power of the individual, but rather the strength of the entire group who has access to it. And this is also what we have been doing at Merck. I mean, there's a very strong partnership again with Merck IT, but also our data office. And we've built something called our procurement ontology. In short, we call it Pronto, but it's an ontology that basically built on our data lake within Merck, that is hosting on one hand procurement data, but is also hosting a bunch of business data. And so basically what we do is really try to create then the impact, whether it is to feed our Gen AI models or whether it's to feed our insight generation. It's really to be able to connect not only procurement data, but also relevant business data so that we can elevate the ability to make more informed decisions as an organization. And see where it's going to take us. So, I think I understand that a lot of people are skeptical about it, but again, I think it's something that we need to double down on. And I think the key starts with having a good data strategy and having a good data process and data lake, because every tool that you're going to implement now is going to create data in some shape or form. And if you don't have that underlying strategy behind it, then basically you're going to continue having data sit in distributed technologies that will not be accessible and will, to your point, yes, there will be data, but it will be unusable data, in my opinion.
Fascinating. Sebastien, I think you made some great strides in what you're doing, and obviously getting over to your CPO position across many organizations in varied industries. That's creditable. I'm sure we'll have a lot of listeners who would be wondering what practical advice could you give them for them to be able to achieve some of the things that you've achieved. What advice would you give aspiring procurement professionals who want to be that next chief procurement officer?
One of the things that for me has always been important, and especially in my call it my intentional phase of my career. So not despite that the first one has definitely helped, but definitely my intentional phase about my career, I started to think differently about how a career should develop, and I started to think much more in terms of experiences rather than roles or job titles or hierarchy. And why do I say that? Is because if I look at where I am today, many of the skills that I might have acquired throughout my career by doing different roles in procurement are not necessarily that usable anymore. Of course, they're helpful, but they don't make me any better than anybody else in the organization. I think what is helping me, especially in my current role as a CPO, is on one hand to be, for example, curious. Again, realizing that what is behind us is not necessarily going to be a predictor for the future, but trying to understand how the world around us is evolving, how the business is evolving, and then what that could mean for procurement. At the same time, I think you need to be a bit bold as well. I mean, progress as an organization can only be made. Of course, you can take small steps and you'll get there as well. But I think if you want to move an entire organization, you need to be bold in some of your thinking. And so I think the existential crisis that we are facing as procurement today is a perfect feeding ground to be bold. at the same time, we're leading in an environment which is complex, which is uncertain, and I don't want to use the term VUCA, but I think it's a reality, and I think that you need to have confidence as a leader, not only in yourself, but more importantly, be confident that your team can make that step. So when you think about that, what is required for me to do your job, it is more about so which type of experiences I can do in my personal or my professional life, which are actually going to help me become better at those things. I mean, for example, being able to translate a vision, being able to tell a compelling story. I mean, storytelling is not something that you're going to do by moving from being a category buyer to a category manager or to a senior category manager or to a category lead. Storytelling is something that is required in my role, but you might need to find different ways of getting there. And it can be, for example, by exposing, by speaking at conferences, or even just by trying to tell stories in at home. And I think that this is a fundamental advice that I would give to all the listeners out there is don't think just in terms of job roles or in career progress or even money, but really think about what is required from that person. How would I want to be in that position? And then think about the experiences that can help you develop those skills or attributes or however you want to call them.
Excellent stuff. I think being bold and curious, absolutely, definitely. But I guess one word that you didn't say that I always get a feel for from you is passion. And I think when you have that, and that came through in your reference to the Hotel California, that's when you inspire people, and that's when those people that you lead become passionate about what you want to do as well, and that makes the storytelling so much easier, I feel. If you truly believe in what you're doing, feel passionate about it, and understand its purpose, then that makes that storytelling so much easier. Sebastian, it's been a pleasure having you. We haven't spoken for ages, so it's really great to catch up, and I hope it's not too long again before we catch up again soon. So thank you for sharing your insights with us on the podcast. Keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you, Sebastian. It was great speaking to you. It really was.
Wow, what a year it's been. Our first year of podcasts, Sam.
Who would have ever have guessed that we'll be joint podcast hosts, Emma?
I know, yeah. And with guest appearances from Jonathan as well. I'm going to have to give him a mention.
Yeah, I guess you should do. And I did say podcast hosts and not podcast stars. You did notice that?
Yeah, no, the stars of the show were definitely our guests. Some real highlights for me have to be our very first one, how it all started with Amanda Davies from Mars Wrigley. I know her standout quote for me was around, we're the first generation who can't say that we didn't know about the impact of climate change, and therefore the last generation that can act upon it before it's too late. That sense of get on with it, make some action, it's our responsibility was quite a powerful message.
Quote of the decade, I think. That was really powerful. I think we should do more with that.
It was.
Maybe get Amanda to come on again and see if she's got any more nuggets for us, because that was really strong.
Yeah, we should, because, she's one of our pioneers, our procurement pioneers this year, so we must definitely get her on again. Yeah, what about you? What highlights for you?
I think following on from that, do you remember the guy from Kantar, Stephen Day? And he said what we should all take on board, and what he said was, it's our job to sell this profession. Do you remember?
I do, yes, that was. And I think he's a SIPS fellow as well, so kind of I think he was saying from a leadership perspective, our responsibility as leaders and fellows to get behind that movement and sell this profession. Yeah, no, definitely.
I think that was strong. That really was, because sometimes we tend to defer it to others, but I think what he was saying is, look, it's how we show up, and by doing that, yeah, we're acting as role models and selling the profession. So yeah, there you go. I think what about yours? Any others from yours? It's been quite a few shows we've done.
I really enjoyed Solomon as well on, what makes a successful leader. I think he talked about, is it time to rebrand procurement and what we do? But he really came across in the need for procurement leaders to really have strong emotional and social intelligence, he called it. So making those connections with people, sometimes, kind of outside of meetings and things like that. So just making connections with people and building relationships, I thought was I really loved that one.
I'll agree. I mean, knowing Suleiman, he really is one who makes those connections, makes those builds those communities and friendships, real friendships outside of the job. I think he thinks that's very, very important, and I wholeheartedly endorse his mind view because he's very, very successful at it. But what about when we speak about geopolitical stuff, there was Charles Hecker who mentioned
Yes.
when speaking about some of the constant change in geopolitics or the impact on supply chains, actually summarizing it very well, where he said, look, there's nothing to get used to anymore. And I guess he's right, because in the current environment, things are going to change all the time. So there's no point us getting used to it. We should already be used to it and have a fair few mitigating plans, or either plan B or two plan A's to deal with any crisis that comes in front of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So many great episodes, inspiring speakers. So yeah, if you missed any of those, make sure you go back and check them out, anyone who's listening in. Hey, Sam, I've loved this year. It's been great being podcast buddy with you.
Ditto. And we look forward to the future of the SIPS Futures podcast going into the next year, right?
And more rants and bants, eh?
I think we started the year with rants and bants, didn't we? I think we got more professional as we went along.
We did. Okay. So that's it for this episode of Futures. We'll be back in 2025 and would like to wish everyone a good end to their year. For any new listeners out there, be sure to check out our previous podcasts. We've had fantastic feedback so far, so please do continue to rate and review us on your favourite podcast platform. This podcast has been brought to you by SIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. For more information on SIPS, head over to sips.org, where you can find out more about our up-and-coming events, excellent training opportunities and much more. For now though, that's it from us. See you next time.